Constant friend indeed. You were right there, providing for me.
God bless everyone. Amen. It is good to be in the house today. I'm about to say house of the Lord. Amen. But it's good to be on the land of the living. Amen. You're listening to 106.9 FM on your radio dial, Real Talk for Real Men. And we also are listening to us on Smooth Radio, Rocky Mount, 100.3 FM. And we're glad to have you here today. Amen. We're going to talk. We're just talking about some Black history earlier. Pastor Lawson and Elder Nat in particular. And let's further that conversation a little bit.
Can I give a Black history testimony?
Yes, you can.
Okay. I wanted to do this last week, but I didn't get it in. But the first Black man to graduate from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill Law School. Mm-hmm. His name was Harvey Beach, and he was from Kinston, North Carolina.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, and he's actually in Black. If you research Black history and you go through blah blah blah, eventually you're gonna see his story.
Okay.
They've got him out there because that was a big deal back then. I think he graduated in the '60s. First Black man to graduate from UNC Law School. And in the South, that was like, oh my. But his wife was in the school system. Mm. And she recognized this poor Black boy that was attending high school in Kinston, mm-hmm. who was very smart in math and accounting.
I think I know who he is.
And she went to North Carolina Central University, where mm-hmm. she served as trustee. And she used her leverage that she had because of her husband and because she was on the board of trustees. And she said, give this young man one of those accounting scholarships. And it happened. Mm. And this young man went to school, flunked out the first year, walked away from it, didn't even care about it. Mm. And this young man got a call during the summer after he had flunked out with a 1.4 GPA. Mm. Got a call, said she wants you to come back to school. She's already made the arrangements because they had suspended me. You can't come back with that kind of average. No. But she had already gone back to the school and said, no, give him another chance. They kept my full scholarship going, and I made straight A's from that point on.
Wow.
Yep, it was me. And to me, that is a good example of how people Black people who become successful, mm-hmm. They're not just out to get rich, which is, not a bad thing.
Right.
But they are also very interested in reaching back and doing what they could do to help others. And I'm not the only one that she helped. There are a lot of young Black people that had that testimony because she reached into their lives and helped them out.
Praise God. What's her name?
Her name is, his name is Harvey Beach, and her name is Mrs. Beach.
That works.
That's what it was. I remember her initial was BT Beach. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Can't think of her actual first and maiden name, first name and maiden name.
That's a wonderful testimony.
That is. And that's a story that's actually repeated, but a lot of stories we don't hear.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think one of my arguments, I guess, is that we've been doing this over time. People been reaching back. It was funny. I was listening to a program yesterday, mm-hmm. and they were talking about the Underground Railroad. And we usually think of Harriet Tubman, but there was another guy that was really doing it too. You know what I'm saying? I can't think of his name right off the top. But, there were people, we have people that we've been fighting this fight since we've been here. So and today is the 29th of February, and somebody mentioned, well, it's the last day. I know they were talking cheek, but the history is American history. This is what people miss.
Yeah.
our Black history is American history.
It is.
Okay,
Because there were so many Caucasian people involved in it too.
and you can't separate it. You know, as far the only reason it gets separated is because they weren't telling our story, so we had to start telling our own story, and that's what's happening now. And so that's why we still need the month, because that's what Carter G. Woodson. That was his, his whole thing. Starting the week and putting out the publication is that the story wasn't being told right.
I remember. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I remember being in school, and during Black History Month, the teacher did, and I was in honors history. That was the highest level you could be in at that time. And my teacher only went over and talked about Crispus Attucks one day. That was our Black History lesson. That one day.
Where were you going to say that?
I ain't gonna say it. I ain't gonna put him out there.
Oh,
Aiden
man.
Grifton. But he talked about Crispus Attucks that one day. Now he talked about him real strong, but that was it. There was nothing else coming behind it. And the truth of the matter is, even in being in high school, I don't think any of my teachers ever really touched it like that.
And that's the difference between kids before that generation in the Black schools, because those Black teachers did it. they taught more of it than than after integration. But I wanted to bring up something else that I learned well, it was after my teenage years. But we used to have in Brooklyn, the Black Cowboys used to come in and put on a show.
Oh,
And before that,
Did they bring their horses?
horses, the whole deal. They, kind of like a rodeo kind of thing, but not, but we didn't know there were Black cowboys. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Coming from the city, and come to find out, now we know, a great portion of the fact that they call them cowboys, is indicative of the fact that, they call Black folks, Black men boys anyway.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of them guys that drove the cattle, they were Black, but see, Hollywood did their thing and just kind of whitewashed that. But yeah, man, these guys were, and I met the guy that was in charge, good, big brother, really cool, and they wanted to show us that they existed and still exist, in certain parts of the country. So, it's just different things that when you don't see them, you don't think they exist, and so we need to it's good to acknowledge that, and talk about that.
when I was younger, I used to think that every Black kid, well, I thought that everybody should have went to, should go to college. As I got older, I started making some adjustments on how I thought about it, because I know a ton of people that got wealthy, that, I'm not gonna say a ton that got wealthy, but I can say a lot of people that made money and didn't go. And I think I was more so on the Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois end of thinking. But as I gotten older, I've been able to embrace both sides, because if we can get some good inroads on economics and do things, I was amazed. I think I was just maybe 10 years ago found out how much people that drive trucks make.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
You brought up W.E.B. Du Bois. Who was that?
He was a great African American that was born in probably I think maybe the 1900s, maybe early 1900s. And I'll give you a little bit more on it. Give me a second. But he was a great man, and he believed more on the end of education was important. And whereas Booker T. Washington believed more on the blue collar experience more so. And that was an experience, what he taught, a lot of Caucasians really got behind that, because they could deal with you telling them work hard, work smart, and gain wealth that way. Whereas in Du Bois, he believed in the talented tenth, and he also believed in that let's put our top 10 people up and sponsor them, which that's what a lot of people did for him. They saw him as being very smart, and I hope this is a word, educatable, and actually put money behind him to help him get further. And that was kind of the viewpoint he kind of held most of his life.
Well, he was also the first, I believe, PhD to come out of Harvard, black PhD.
Yes, sir.
And got his doctorate. And also, he did a lot of writing historically. And like you said, yes, he definitely pushed the education area. He also was one of the founding members of the NAACP.
Yes, he was.
So
okay,
I just wanted to.
that's
The
fine.
reason I asked
Yeah,
is
yeah.
because I wanted you to explain more. Because a lot of times we'll hear things, and people will hear and don't know. They'll maybe associate the name, and we don't know. And that's one of the things I started to love about doing the bookmark thing, because I would it made me research and try to go see people that we don't usually hear about.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? To put on there, and I found some really fascinating people that did some awesome things, and it doesn't get the play that it should, I think.
Yeah, and you think about it, the debates that they had were just so different, and it's kind of sometimes I wonder. You look at the black conservative per se, and then you look at the black liberal and the difference in how they might be thinking and how they're moving. And I don't know if we need both or
I don't know. Here's my thought on this.
okay.
The black conservative of the past is not the same person today.
That's true.
The Republican Party of the past is not the
No,
same
that's
party
true.
today.
Absolutely.
So, I can't really see. I think the conservative part of it, there are people that are conservative that are not MAGA people.
Right, absolutely not.
And so, if it's just the ideas and they're dealing with that from a honest position,
right.
we can deal with that.
Right.
But when when it's not an honest argument and it's just idolatrous concept, which is what I see, then you're kind of going off the rails. So we don't really need that.
You ain't talking about my good friend Tim Scott, are you?
Well, amongst others.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, since we're on the air,
Yeah, that's right.
he might have some fans. I don't know but I don't really personally, we don't need folks that
We love
and
you,
it
Mr.
is
Trump.
and it is idolatry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's I know we're gonna go into the spiritual side of it, but it is when you worship one person, even the system that we live in isn't based on one person.
Yeah. The biggest problem, I think, with politicians on either side is, when you're in a democratic political system, personal ambitions can be a problem.
Oh.
Because now you don't have the needs of the people or the desires of the people as your priority. Your priority is getting where you want to go.
That's good.
And you will sacrifice the people to get there. And our whole political system is supposed to be based on majority, and we got too many politicians that don't care about the majority. They don't care about what anybody wants except for what they want for themselves. And that's terrible.
Well, I'm gonna say one other thing. We gotta really, when you start getting into that whole thing, you gotta look at the historical factor of how this thing started. And when it started, we weren't a part of when it started.
Right.
We were like, they didn't even want us because of the slavery issue. They didn't want us, the South didn't want us to be full people. And the North went along with it, to get the thing going. And so
They benefited too.
yeah, they
North-
always
The
benefited.
North benefited.
They always benefited. They benefited from the free labor of the South.
Yeah.
The issue was, we talk, yes, it was about slavery, but what was it about the slavery? It was about the economics of the slavery.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? These guys down here got free labor and they making too much money.
Yeah.
So, they didn't break up the country just, it was about slavery and us, but it wasn't about us. So that's another story for another day, but I just wanted to kind of put that in.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting to me is the fact that after the Civil War, and they put in place these laws that would kind of elevate the black man, and most of right after the Civil War, there were a lot of black men that were in office. Okay.
From the South.
But even after the Civil War, there still weren't a lot of black men in office in the North. It just didn't exist. So the only reason they were there in the South is because after the Emancipation Proclamation, they actually began to ensure that black people got some leverage, some land, some political positions, and that kind of thing. Now, they eventually lost it through the pressure that came from Jim Crow. But it's the interesting thing to me is that although they were doing this in the South and making it happen, there really wasn't a lot of that going on in the North, which is supposed to be the promised land for the black man. It just wasn't happening that much in the North.
And I think we've gotten a wrong history of it, because when I was growing up, I thought that once the slave ran up north, that's pretty much now they're in heaven. They in the promised lands,
yeah.
and all that, but not really understanding that they sent bounty hunters. I mean, a lot of people did work with the bounty hunters up north to make sure they pulled the black man back down to the South, or whatever kind of punishment or whatever happened. There was a lot of that, and even to the point where I watched the movie and then I went and did research probably last year, and I got to understand it, because I thought that once they got up to Canada, then everybody was kind of like, "Oh, you're equal to me," and it wasn't like that. I should have known better.
It wasn't like that nowhere in the world. Really.
No. And then, so even then, what shocked me, they had it where it was a good documentary. It showed where people had got all the way up to Canada and up north and Nova Scotia and all the other little places, and then was turned around, and at a certain point was promised land over in Africa. When they got back to Africa, they still had bounty hunters that would go to Africa to catch those folk again, to ship them back to America. I said, get out of here. What in the world?
Just before the Civil War, the North, in an effort to prevent the Civil War, allowed laws whereby if slaves came up north, it was legal for the people from the South to come and get them and take them back. That was something that they gave into just before the Civil War.
And you got to look at it from the whole picture. There were pockets where people, once they escaped, could deal, and it depended on the state.
Yeah.
We have a federalist system where the states they have their own different things. Just like even here in North Carolina, different counties are different. Right. We're different then too.
That's true.
So we got to look at the whole picture. And so there's a lot of things. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment allowing black people to vote, 1870. That was an important fact. Not black people. I'm sorry, black men.
Yeah.
That
weren't scared.
Right. And then, like you said, a lot of people kind of got into it from the South, and you had, legislators and even a senator. So, it's a lot of stuff to delve into. But go ahead, Pastor Forbes. I know we're going to a break.
All right. So this has been a good conversation. You listen to Real Talk for Real Men. We're talking a little bit about Black history, Black economics, and we're going to just have a conversation. Y'all get a chance to eavesdrop in on it. And we are glad to have you here with us today. You listen to Real Talk for Real Men on Awesome Radio and Smooth Radio. We'll talk to you in a moment.
Hi, this is Minister Andrew Davis. Are you overwhelmed with the cares of life? Are you stressed and don't know what to do? Does your spirit need encouragement? If the answer is yes, then tune in to Sound Biblical Truth on Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. and Friday at 7 o'clock p.m. Again, Sound Biblical Truth on Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. and Friday at 7 o'clock p.m. It will be food for your spirit and encouragement to your soul. And remember, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Have a safe and victorious week. God bless you.
Surely in the family, God is with me. Surely in the family, God is with me. Surely in the family, God is with me.
Praise the Lord. You're listening to the Awesome Radio Network, Awesome Radio 106.9 FM on your radio dial. And you're also listening to us from Smooth Radio, Rocky Mount 100.3 FM. It is what a great way to start your day. What are some of the things you think about Reconstruction during the Reconstruction period, Elder? What are some of the great things that you see came out of that?
Out of Reconstruction,
Yeah, right after
the
slavery.
first Reconstruction,
Yes, sir.
because there's folks that there was more than one.
Okay.
The first Reconstruction, I don't know, the wholesale freedom from slavery as law. You know what I'm saying? Even though we had things going on after that, but that was one. And voting, the 14th Amendment is pretty. All three of those amendments were good. The 13th Amendment, the freedom. The 14th, if you're born here, because that was one of the things that, if you're born in American soil, that whole thing is in an argument now, but that actually came out of the 14th Amendment for us.
Yeah.
And then, in 1870, you had the voting. So those are the things that came out of it, and it all fell apart in 1877 when they had that presidential election that I believe it was Rutherford B. Hayes.
Rutherford B. Hayes, yes.
Yeah, and they so to compromise, they brought the troops. See, because they had put troops in the South to keep things, balanced.
Temperature right.
Yeah, and then the compromise was to take the troops out. So, that entered us into the Jim Crow era.
Yeah, that was the only way that the black people could really experience the leverage that they were supposed to have as a result of Reconstruction. You had to have troops from the North down there that they could access whenever somebody got in the way. Once they pulled those troops out from the South, Reconstruction was over, because there's no way that black people are going to be free to do the rights that they have been given, the things that have been set up for them. There's no way they're going to be able to enjoy it unless there's some troops down there to enforce it. Because things almost went right back to the way they were when those troops left.
And then you had the first coup in America. You talk about this in Wilmington, where they took people out of office at gunpoint.
Yeah.
Black folks had
They were literally, it's bad when you mayor and this one say, put your hands up, get out of here. They ran them out of town.
Yeah.
Well, it just goes to show you that after all those years had passed since the Civil War, I guess some folks would have been thinking that, over time, the white people in the South would get used to black people being side by side with them, having their own place and have their own property, blah, blah, blah. But no, none of that had changed. Their attitudes were still exactly the way they were during slavery.
I
Same
got a
attitude.
question though. Do you think that if there had been more um, punishment for those who rebelled, would that made a difference?
Well, over time, but from what was it like 10 years? 10 years just wasn't enough, from 1865 to 1870, something that just wasn't enough time. But I think if those troops had remained down there, even though, there were economic calamities going on, if those troops had stayed there for maybe 20 years, I think it would have made a bigger difference because after a while, you would have found instead of folks just taking stuff back from black people, there would have been more partnerships formed. Black people and white people would have begun to work together for their own, interest, but because the armies left, they didn't have the partnership with them. They just said, look, you might as well leave because we're taking this land. And there was nothing they could do. I mean, what could they do?
They had the guns. But and we also got to look too. A lot of people after slavery, despite what some folks say, a lot of people went west.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They did go west.
Yeah.
A lot of people, everybody didn't come north. Some people went west.
Yeah.
And there was more because it was land. So there was a lot more opportunity to do, and so there's some really good stories coming out of, the westward movement until the rest of the country started moving west.
Yeah, I saw a
And
documentary.
then they brought the mess with them. So.
I saw a documentary on that not too long ago, and this was, of course, past the Reconstruction era. But it was when the lumber industry began to grow in Washington State and Oregon State. They were bringing black people from the South to come up there and work in the lumber yards, cutting down trees, processing wood, converting it into 2x4 boards and building materials and stuff. And they had some very strict rules. If any white person discriminated against a black person, they were fired immediately. I mean, they were, and it wasn't so much that they loved black people. It's just that they had a business, and they knew that that in order for that business to succeed, people had to work together. And the black labor was, it wasn't free labor, but it was cheap labor. And when they brought those black men up from the South, it was like, we're gonna take care of y'all. We ain't gonna let nobody, ain't gonna be no lynchings. And I saw that documentary, and there was one family in particular that it was centered around, and man, they were tough. They were tough about protecting black people.
That sounds good, but what do you have to say about the Tulsa riots then?
The Tulsa riots.
Yeah, because you had the black banks, you had black business owners, you had a lot of the African Americans ended up doing better than a lot of their Caucasian counterparts. And when they start seeing they had the new ride, they were coming up, that little bit of angst that a lot of them had, almost like when we had Obama, it created a level. Because I honestly, when Obama came into office, and I know this is a big swing difference in conversation. When he came in, I thought, well, maybe all this racial stuff is over. Now everybody gonna start loving each other in this way and that way. And then I didn't know that people would have such an allergic reaction to a black man having the most power in the world. And then they got this kind of red fever, kind of like a pumpkin fever. And some of the great pumpkin came into office. Hope I ain't offending nobody.
You are.
Yeah, my bad. So comes into office and get to tell people I can stand right in the middle of the road and I can point a gun and ain't nobody gonna do anything. Y'all will love it. Then turn around and could say that, all African countries, and now this one took me for a loop. All these little nations that we let come over here, they're toilet bowl nations that you just sit on. You can just sit and relieve yourself on. And what shocked me was so many African people in Africa actually thought well of him. Shocked me because I know some. I mean, I know a lot. And they sat back and they were like, and I thought to myself, this is something else. And even some of the people that's here, to see that they even created an award for him at at just what, last week, about doing the most for black people. And then this man turned right around and say, there's a lot of bright lights in here, and all I can see are black people. That's a far stretch for me. Everybody laughing, and that was funny, and on, and y'all gonna like me because of the tennis shoes that, y'all African Americans gonna really love me because I've got tennis shoes now, and y'all gonna really love me. But you know what? You know who supported my mugshot the most? African Americans. Now I say I kind of like the mugshot, but with a different reason. Thought he might get his due, get the award he should get. So a little time,
But he wasn't talking to us.
Yeah. I know. And so, with that being said, there's a lot to discuss in the next segment. If you have anything you want to add, call 252-756-2008. You're listening to Real Talk for Real Men on your radio dial, and we are excited to talk to you. Give us a call, and we will see you after the sponsorship break.
The critical importance of a well-tailored liability waiver is essential today.
That's attorney David Gibbs Jr., and this is the Legal Alert.
Pastor Stephen's church in West Virginia was hosting a Bible camp, and he needed liability waivers to protect the ministry. All liability waivers do not provide equal protection. Let me repeat that. All liability waivers do not provide equal protection. Courts are much less willing to enforce broad waivers that fail to clearly lay out the details of all the risks involved in an activity. It is crucial to your legal protection that your liability waivers are carefully tailored. This means each activity, the foreseeable risks associated with it, and the specific dates must be clearly spelled out. Let me repeat that. Each activity, the foreseeable risks associated with it, and the specific dates must be clearly spelled out. If you have any questions about liability exposure for your church activity and what should be in a liability waiver, we'd be honored to help you at the Christian Law Association.
Why not get the answers you need for the legal question that's nagging you? Visit christianlaw.org. That's christianlaw.org.
Surely in the famine, God is with me. Surely in the famine, God is with me. Surely in the famine, God is with me.
I want to ask y'all a question. All right. We're back from 106.9 on 106.9 FM and also Awesome Radio, and we're also on Smooth Radio, Rocky Mount 100.3 FM. I want to ask this question. What do you think, which one probably has benefited us the most? And I'm going to read a little something, and then y'all can chime in. To be on the same side fighting for the same purpose, progress, and uplifting the black race. We're talking about Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Who do you think, now, they both were trying to, in their way, get us to get the same purpose, progress, and uplifting our people. My question is, who do you think which side do you kind of lean on? And give me a second. Both men were aware that technological advancement was of the foremost importance to advancement of African Americans. Washington in 1901 wrote the book Up from Slavery, and Du Bois, 1903, The Souls of Black Folks were immediately hailed as classic commentary, due to their efforts to address the then Negro problem in America. There were a number of Black Americans who made a valiant effort to mitigate poverty, illiteracy, racial discrimination, high mortality rates, and other desolate conditions that plagued many African Americans. who do you what side do y'all lean on when you talk about these issues between Webb Du Bois or Booker T. Washington?
That's a good question.
I'll take it. Well, are you gonna?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I'll take it. I think we need them both. My thing is, I think that's one of the problems that we kind of fall into sometimes is separating. Okay, they both had the interests of black people in mind, and they were doing it from two different perspectives. And I think that's always, there's always that. But we can disagree with each other as to how to get to the same point. I mean, that's fair enough. And I think they both, Tuskegee was a big deal. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? From Washington, education is definitely a big deal. So I don't put it on either or. I think they both were really important and did important work, for the people, as other people during the time. They get the most, they're celebrated the most, but there were other people at the time also doing some things. And I think it all counts. And I know the question was about Du Bois and Washington, but if you come on up, even the civil rights movement during the 60s, one of the successes, one of the big things about that was that there were different people with different ideas. One was saying by any means necessary. Other was saying, okay, let's have this peace thing. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so there were different, and there were other people doing things. And it was, I don't know, I think it got a little bit much for them to keep up with because people were speaking out. So that's my thing. I think it's both.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's both also. I think we needed both in the case of Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington. We needed both of them, and Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X. We needed both of them. I think one of the things that you have to consider is I think Malcolm X had a very reasonable strategy. The problem is he was in the North. There's no way that would have worked in the South. And what Martin Luther King was doing in the South was probably the best strategy. Because, if Malcolm X and his crew were walking in Georgia or Mississippi with guns like that, that would not have come out well. No. He was able to do that in Philadelphia and some of the, some of the cities up north. But if that had happened in Mississippi or Georgia or Alabama, it would not have ended well. And I'm not saying that, they couldn't have held their own, but it just wouldn't have ended well. There would have been blood in the streets. So I'm thinking that both strategies were needed. Even the mindset in the North, even though a lot of black people had gone up to the North from the South, the mindset in the North was a whole lot different from the mindset in the South. There were a lot of people that in the South that, and I know some people might disagree with this, a lot of people in the South had the attitude of, look, let's just get along, let's just, I know it's hard, I know it's tough, I don't like what they're doing, but let's just get along, There were some black people in the South that, they liked white people. They didn't have any hatred for white people.
Well, that's our people.
Whereas in the North, they had blood in their eyes.
Do you think they didn't hate them, or they knew the cruelty that they brought?
It was a balance of that. But okay. Based on even my life, I was born in the 50s, and there were a lot of militant black people in North Carolina, even when I went to college. But there were also a lot of black people that were not militant. They wanted civil rights, they wanted equal rights, but they weren't militant about it. Right. I don't like what you think about me, but I'm not going to fight you about it.
I got a question for y'all.
People in the North, it was Malcolm X was more of a fit-in leader.
And
for
also the
people
Black
in the North.
Panthers.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah, and the Black
very
Panthers, that's
important during that time too. What was your question, sir?
My question would be, and I'm gonna ask you from the stance of the military. And my question for you is the stance of from the stance of being in a historical black college. How did you feel in the military during the time of when civil rights was going on? Well, you probably by that time, you probably were in a place where integration was a little bit. What do you think?
Well, when
How
I
was
joined
that?
in '73,
Yeah.
I'm a little just past the movement
Yeah.
in that sense. Um, the military probably was ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I think they
In
were.
the sense that, we were when I trained, we were the Vietnam War was, I didn't know it, but it was actually winding down. You know what I'm saying? It ended up ending in '75. But we trained together, and they made sure that we treated each other, because it's a whole lot different. When you go to war, it's kind of like the guy in the
Us against
foxhole
them.
next to you.
Yeah.
It don't matter.
Yeah.
Well, y'all fighting another enemy, so
Yeah.
y'all ain't got time for that. Whatever it is that y'all got going on back here. So I think it had changed from the way the military used to be. When Truman, pushed forward that, he desegregated,
Right.
integrated the services, but before that, we were still fighting, but we were separate.
Right.
But, so by the time it got to me, yeah, it had changed. But that's a history within itself too.
Because you look at our history, we fought even when it came to this. Well, we had people that fought in the Revolutionary War a little bit. Then we had the Civil War, and they had it on, a little bit.
1812, all of them. We
Yeah.
were in all of them.
Yeah. then it started progressing. You're getting to the Korean War. You're looking at World War II, and then as you see it, by the time they got to you, the military, I think, started getting smarter. But we got to do this together. We're gonna have to do really. I think it probably, people got used to more of that. Because isn't that an interesting thought, though, that you would think that they would sit back and think, oh, we need these African Americans, because there was some African Americans that made deals with the British, and in the Revolutionary War, some of them left.
And it was about freedom, though.
Yeah, and that's how a lot of African Americans ended up going up into Canada during that process, because they made deals here, and the way they could say, well, okay, we fought on your side with Revolutionary War, we got to go somewhere else, and they helped them get to Canada.
I know we're gonna go to Pastor Lawson, but let me say something on that. That shows you that even in today's world, we're pragmatic. When we vote, it's about us.
Yeah.
You're voting for yourself.
Right.
And so the deals they made was for their own survival.
Right.
And I think we've always been like that, even like you said, when you were talking about the South and the North. People were making decisions for themselves.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? And we got to understand that. I think that's a big deal. We listen to the voting thing. Everybody talking about voting. It's not that we so caught up with the party. We're voting for ourselves and who is collectively helping us. So, we got to understand. A lot of times we throw things out and they're not in context.
Right.
And so, we fought in every war that this country has had.
How were you affected by some of the movements, like, for instance, Muhammad Ali? His idea was that, this is what he expressed. I don't know what he really felt in his heart, but he said, the Viet Cong haven't done anything to me.
Nothing to me.
Why should I go fight them?
I think he was sincere with that. Yeah.
Oh, I know he was sincere with
Yeah.
that.
So how did that have any impact or affect you at all?
Not really. I looked at it and
Couldn't help but think about it.
I took it. I was younger. I'm like, that's high school. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And the
Pragmatic.
protests were really kind of gearing up. You know what I'm saying? 70, 69 up in there. And when it's 70, my high school in the Bronx, we had some white kids, and they were burning draft cards. That's when they started killing the draft. You know what I'm saying? So, I think people respected some people respected, I respected his view, you know what I'm saying? But I
pragmatic.
enlisted anyway,
Yeah.
and it had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
It had to do with my survival, because I had dropped out, and I'm like, and my mama kept telling me, you need to go into service, because my uncle had been in, and her cousin, so she was like looking for a way out for me. And so eventually, I kind of tricked myself into going.
Yeah, there was another issue that's related to
Hold on, Pastor Love, because you ready to jump. How about you during that time?
Well-
Because my question for you is, I've noticed what it is to go to the campus life on HBCUs, and I wanted to go to a HBCU somehow or another. Some things I was going to go to a HBCU, and I ended up in East Carolina. Now, my question for you is, when you go on a HBCU and you see that all those chocolate people together and learning and uplifting, what was your thoughts when it came through at that time?
Well, there was so much. The thing about going to an all black college, it kind of gave me a little bit of understanding of why some leaders thought that, after slavery, if we went back to Africa, we could make Africa better. That it kind of lended some thought to that, because when you get black people together on a college campus, first of all, every month is Black History Month. Every month.
It was beautiful. It's beautiful when
Every
you go
single
visit.
month is Black
Good
History
God
Month.
Almighty, it's so beautiful.
And you get to express, all kinds of black issues and understanding and perspectives, and there were so many different ideas. Everybody didn't have the same idea as to what they thought about racial conflicts. There were some people that said loud, "I'm black and I'm proud. I don't need the white man to do anything for me. I don't have to fight him. I can make it." There were some that had that perspective. There were others that said, we can defeat them. We can beat them. Let's get them, and there was a lot of in-betweens, but it seemed like everybody on the campus were, and remember, when you're on a college campus, you're really dealing with some of the cream of the crop, so to speak. I mean,
I got you.
I'm not knocking anybody that don't go to college, but let's face it, these are people, they all graduated from high school, okay? They all avoided, getting a felony on their record, most of them anyway. There may have been a few that sneaked in. So it's different from just hanging out somewhere else. On a college campus, there's just so much richness that's there. We had people from New York. Some of my best friends on college campus were from New York. One friend, he was a tennis player, called him City Pimp. That was his name, nickname, rather.
That sounds more like a rapper's name.
We had people from the West, from the South, from the North. We had people from Africa. We had people from India. People from all over the world. So, there were so many different perspectives, and it was so enjoyable to learn, to debate, to discuss with people that had perspectives that you would have never even thought about. But I think the biggest thing was that you were free to be black, express blackness, promote blackness, and there was no resistance. Because it was an all-black school. We did have one white guy on the football team. He was the kicker.
As long as you want quarterback, I'm
But
fine.
that's cool, though. That's cool. That's one thing that's true with a lot of HBCUs. That there's a few that come and they don't discourage that.
Oh,
But I wanted to say one thing.
Okay,
You
go ahead.
brought it up. You kind of said it about the culture, and we got to remember the culture, music was saying
Yes.
a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And that song that you just mentioned, before that, we used to have a saying, we were Negroes then. And, you know, I'm a Negro. When I turn black, I'll let you know. We
Yeah.
used to
Yeah,
say that.
I used to say it.
And then James Brown brought that song. That
Black
song
and I'm
was
proud.
powerful.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And we just changed our whole way of speaking about that. So yeah, that was a fascinating thing too.
yeah, yeah. There was a lot. There was a lot going on in the '70s. I mean, there is.
The 60s.
Well, actually, the '60s. You can say the
60s and 70s,
'60s
yeah.
and '70s.
Yeah.
'60s was more about the struggle. I mean, from my experience, the '60s was more about the struggle. The '70s was more about advancement. I mean, there was so much advancement that was going on. Like you mentioned, James Brown, people in Hollywood, black people in sports. It seems like there was a black promotion going on in every facet of life. So the '70s to me was a big deal.
A lot of things changed too, though, after King and Kennedy, Kennedy, and people were and Malcolm after those assassinations, and after '68, after '68, and Nixon ran the table. A lot of things changed, and that's why a lot of people get this mass incarceration thing. They get that wrong. That started with Nixon. Nixon had a plan, and he pushed that thing through. And that's something to get into, because by the time the '94 crime bill happened, mass incarceration was already happening.
Yeah.
But that's another story. Go ahead.
No, I was trying to think of, there's a Caucasian senator that graduated from I think North Carolina Central University with law. Who was that?
The law school.
Yeah, I can't even think of. I think I have an idea who it is. I was trying to look it up.
Over half of the law school graduates at Central were white.
Oh Jesus!
I mean, it's kind of
And,
weird.
and see, they use.
But that's what
And
was
guess
going
what they
on.
used to do that? Affirmative action. They used they used the fact that we had what do you call it? A minority's presence.
Quota.
But minority presence scholarship. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Well,
there.
the most people
The
that
thing is,
benefit.
you wouldn't have a law school if you don't have a certain number of people that's going to apply and attend. And if you'd have just went with black people, you probably wouldn't have had enough.
Yeah. What'd you say?
The most people that benefited from affirmative action were white women.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. And on that note, you've listened to Real Talk for Real Men on 106.9 FM on your radio dial. We want to see you next week. We love you. God bless you. And we'll see you 106.9 FM on your radio dial.
Surely